absolutely blinded. Get an ocular blind. Just about not your way. Sorry, I don't know.
It was really good.
I mean, Andy. Thanks very much.
Vodka. Eyelashes. Hello? Hey. Okay, sounds good. He's just getting ready to go by.
I'm just gonna do it on this thing, I guess. I think it's just gonna work fine on here.
Yeah.
I didn't know how the full screen two thing would work.
Yeah,
I'm just waiting for
him to, okay. She just had a exit interview and she's 2 seconds away, so she'll be here if you have any issues.
No. We're trying to Skype her not to. Oh, I talked to her last night. She's like, oh, I'd love to see it now.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you want to wait a few minutes then?
well, yeah, like
We'll wait a couple of minutes.
just
And whenever,
yeah.
let me know when you're ready to go.
Yeah, I'm good.
You mean between the presentation and the
I was thinking about yesterday actually when I because if it's actually in the I can take it home tonight. Yeah, because but just so it's like no,
I guess if you keep
yeah, that's good. Yes. He just knows super that. It's gonna like tuck through like smush.
What do you think? Do you think go ahead? So welcome everyone to the last presentation of today. Andrew Hawkinson is going to present his project, which involves a component that many of the other directed studies don't, which is basically a design build component, strong part of it. And so Andrew, I'm going to pass it over to you. Andrew's committee is spread around the world, so the other members are trying to Skype in.
We tried to Skype in, and the rural Mexican internet's not the best today.
Anyway,
But
pass it on. You go ahead, Dan.
Greg was my committee member for GP1 and 2, and Renata Elizondo and Daniel Lopez are both architects from the state of Oaxaca, who I worked with for the past 2 or 3 months while I was there. In the beginning, there was always the question as to the end. That is, the question of exploration and how to manage the different levels of theory and practice. Each exploration should make more clear another, the theories of phenomenology, the biographies of the town and its continuation of ritual, and a student of architecture building in rural Mexico. The experiences are a path to discovery. The explorations trace these paths and make them apparent. The journey is one of reconstruction, to take apart and put back together using a new definition. This thesis investigates these explorations through living in, learning with, and building in the small Zapotec community of Teotitlan del Valle, Mexico. The beginning was slow, perhaps as long as 20,000 years ago. Ancestors of the adventurers who had passed through the Arctic land bridge were beginning to inhabit the central valleys of Oaxaca. By 7000 BC, those in the valley began sowing seed, raising livestock. Settlement had begun. Fast forward 5,000 years, we began to see signs of community. Villages are being established, small populations who begin to rapidly progress, burying their dead, grinding corn for drink, stewing meats, and weaving cloth. Archaeological findings place the beginnings of Zapotec Teotitlan in this era. Around 500 BC, the ancestors of today's Zapotec communities founded the city of Monte Alban, known to be the metropolis of the Americas. It flourished to a population of 50,000 people. The abandonment of Monte Alban resulted in smaller communities spread throughout the central valleys of Oaxaca, each still holding steadfast to their unique craft from years past. Modern-day Oaxaca is located in the heart of the Central Valley. It's a colonial city with unmatched beauty. It's at once a tourist mecca as well as a trading hub for the surrounding communities and villages. The colonial district of Oaxaca is frozen in time, alive with local traditions, gastronomy, and architecture. It's once sophisticated and provincial. Stepping outside the bounds of colonial Oaxaca, the factual reality of the state emerges. This is the second poorest state in Mexico. Its residents earn an average of $4 US a day. Subsistence farmers rely on inconsistent weather patterns to grow food using millennial-old technologies. Little more than tin roofs and adobe walls make up the average home. Plumbing and electricity are inventions of the past 2 decades, with many without. Yet traditions of family, faith, and craft remain as steadfast rituals for thousands of these indigenous Oaxacans. The beginning was slow. Going back 4 years, I came to Teotitlan as a student, a tourist. An hour later, the next village. 3 years later, I would arrive on a working trip. With my thesis in mind, conversations evolve into the unexpected. Through this trip, I find a program, a site, a client. I begin to observe the place, its surroundings, the market, full of today's business, flowers, meats, friendly conversation. I walked around the town, and suddenly, everywhere, colors, patios, the weavings of the town, the landscape. And I begin thinking of this site, and I start to see Teotitlan through the eyes of a Teotico. I was interested in the monotony of the uniform construction methods, the seemingly infinite variety of outcomes from a single method. Walking around the community and everywhere, stacks of materials, loosely stacked, heavy, ordered, big, small, floors, roofs, patios, gardens, the primitive hut scattered across the landscape. Women in the market selling the fruits of their labor, trading goods for what is needed today. Trumpets from within the school walls, a ceremony being held in the church, a parade filling the streets. Thinking of the site and its surroundings, images began to come into my mind. The beginning was slow. Going back in time, experienced this place as one may have 2,000 years ago, working a site, a place set in the landscape with an architectural quality older than anything around it, a place that could have somehow always been there. A place that relates to the people, their belonging, a place that responds to the desires of the community and echoes its architectural surroundings. Ritual maintains the unique self-generated character of Teotico belonging within the community. Life cycle rituals, weddings, baptisms, marriage, funerals are commonplace and can be witnessed regularly within the community. Economic and familial rituals exist as participatory acts of preservation and respect, which take place in the privacy of the home, unavailable to those outside of the Zapotec community. Their own pre-Hispanic language of Zapotec remains the first language for many in Teotitlan. Through weaving, Teotitlan maintains a millennial-old ritual of belonging within the community. The textiles produced in Teotitlan are not only a pragmatic commodity with a function and value, but representations of human creativity and ritual. Wool is purchased from the marketers, harvested from a family stock of sheep. It's washed in the river, spread out in the sun to dry. It's cleaned and carded. It's spun into yarn. It's dyed with locally sourced materials. Pine bark creates browns, minerals blues, and cochinilla creates the deep reds that Oaxaca has become famous for. The town is called Teotitlan in the Mexican language, in its own Zapotec language, Pagüe. The ancestors gave it this name because they say that they had idols and gods on top of the mountain that they worship near the town with that name. Teotitlan is an indigenous Zapotec community in the foothills of the Sierra Juarez mountain range in the central valleys of Oaxaca. 30 miles from the city of Oaxaca, its 4,500 residents are the ancestors of weaving traditions dating back 2,500 years. Like many, they were conquered in 1521 by the Spanish. They took control of the area, but took a very peculiar action towards Teotitlan. While technically under their domain, the domain of the new Spanish regime, they were allowed to keep their land, their identities, their rituals, their language. The Spanish recognized the potential in the weaving practices of Teotitlan and began to invest in new weaving technologies and infrastructures. This became Teotitlan's first encounter with a system of global capitalism. No longer were these weavings solely for subsistence and pragmatic use. They were able to be produced for profit and art on a global scale. In Martin Heidegger's essay, Building Dwelling Thinking, he writes, "Living among things is the basic principle of human existence. The relationship of man to place, through places and to spaces, is based on his dwelling in them, as he speaks to the nature of dwelling in our place." Norberg Schultz introduces us to the term genus loci and to identify the core character of place. Kenneth Frampton coined the current terms identity and regionalism and their association to one another in architecture. Instead of these terms, I prefer to talk about belonging because it's related to a specific experience and place. We don't live in a world of abstraction, but always in a world of real things, people, places, surroundings, materials, experiences. Occupying oneself with the inherent laws of these things, together with an architectural brief, sets out from and eventually returns to these real things. Continued into modern day, the geography of Teotitlan maintains its association with ritual and religion. The mountain that overshadows Teotitlan, Pikachu in Spanish, is mentioned in the Relación Gráfica de Teotitlan as a place where Teoticos went to worship their gods and idols. The Zapotec name for Teotitlan, Xia, means under the rock in English. According to local legend, Teotitlan is associated with a sun god in the form of a bird that descends from the heavens to his temple. The location of the temple and the spot where he is supposed to have descended is on top of this mountain. To this day, Teotitlan still makes an annual pilgrimage to the top of Pikachu every year, all 4,500 residents, on the 3rd day of May, as they have for thousands of years. Only now, like many other rituals in Teotitlan, they are associated with the Catholic religion. These Catholic rituals celebrated in Teotitlan contain many elements tracing back to pre-Hispanic beliefs. The Catholic Church, rebuilt in 1729, was built upon the razed ruins of the pre-Hispanic Zapotec temple. Incorporated in the stonework of the church are the remains of the destroyed temple, a unique juxtaposition of Zapotecness and Catholicism that manifests itself both in the built environment but also in the daily rituals and traditions of the Zapotec people. Situated within the river valley of Teotitlan, the site presents three wonderful views of the surrounding area. The Sierra Juarez Mountains to the north, the rolling landscapes below to the south, and to the west, the culturally significant peak of Pikachu. It's currently, or it was currently, a site that requires improvisation to function. At a certain point during this design phase, there comes a time, a moment of truth, says Peter Zumthor, a moment when the project becomes real. Pull out your sketches again, questioning all of your ideas up until that point. Go back to the drawing board and start from scratch, even if you already have detailed drawings. During the summer design phase, there were several iterations of what I called the cave, the court, and the garden. And what in the end seems to more accurate reflect the reality of building wasn't always part of its conception, just revealing itself through discussion, discovery, and was defined when I returned to Teotitlan in September. The first sketches and models suggest a much more romantic notion than was realized. The reality of budgets, materials, labor, and time needed to be factored in. In the end, the garden maintains the aesthetic of a courtyard patio, the surrounding a frame. The design process thus becomes a transformation process. The so-called idea continues to evolve by being transferred through different materials, mediums. The sketch transforms through different scales, the model assumes different materials, forms. The drawings represent the reality of the built. And though much has changed during the course of the design phase, what was present was the desire to renew a site that is regarded as important to a small group of Teoticos, to build upon a sense of belonging, to create a space for enjoyment, a place to make memories, a place to return to that fits with its surroundings. The build would take place over 8 weeks. The site would be deconstructed and reassembled under a new definition, through familiar materials and methods with those who call this place their own. Building in Teotitlan, I began to comprehend the logistics of building, how we would realize the so-called idea for the project with the available resources. The methods must adjust to the materials, the craft must adjust to the labor, the scope to time, this must work with that, and so on. All the while attempting to maintain the objective and the qualities of the project we set out for. Proving to be a daily struggle, maintaining the objectives while juggling the logistics meant that decisions needed to be made on site and at any moment. Water and electricity are not available on a daily basis. Deliveries are made on schedules of others. Mexico is made of stone and it's very hard. Time and money are limited resources, yet through these constraints, possibilities emerge. We work with our hands, we sweat, we get dirty, we work towards a level of craft to redefine the site. A site that could operate without improvisation, a site safe to use, a joy to be at. Organizing labor and money became two of my most difficult tasks during my time in Teotitlan. Physical labor is exhausting, but only operates between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Relationships between people and money is a sensitive dynamic. The majority of the funding for this project came through private donations. These donations would need to cover all materials, equipment, labor, all of these receipts necessary for a project. For this project, once in Teotitlan, I hired one maestro de obra and his assistant, Huevo. Teotitlan maintains a cash-based economy. No bank or ATM exists in town. Every Sunday required a 40-kilometer journey on public transportation to replenish the project and pay outstanding receipts. 3 unique social institutions exist within the town that were crucial for the project. Respect, which is ritual-based authority, compadrazgo, ritual-based kinship, and gelegetza, which is a sort of friendly loan of money or animals or material or time that has existed for hundreds of years in town. Through this, many members of the club donated materials and labor towards the project. It was also very common for someone to be passing by and doing so donate an amount of material or time to the project. Without these institutions and their strong continuation in Teotihuacan, this project may not have been possible. The aspects of unpredictability and foreign building methodologies of the project became another struggle, a challenge, but later a delight. Because of the raw, lo-fi building nature, many decisions needed to be made on the fly when the unexpected arose. Complex coursing patterns, delicate connections, refined materials were beyond the vocabulary of a once detailed design. The project must adapt to its conditions, obey a different set of rules set out by materials, labor, and money to create a space that was meant for the site and for its people. One of the most revealing things was the difference between working in a computer environment and the built reality of building in Teotihuacan. I rarely had control over quality of labor or materials. Maintaining the intent of the design while working with the available materials and labor was a struggle at first. Straight lines and 90-degree corners were not possible. Adapting the project to allow for this opened up new possibilities, new freedoms for the project to obey its own rules that trust the beauty of the local, its roughness, its grain. The beginning was slow. There was no end. Over the course of the 8 weeks, the plain surface was reconstructed, its foundations reinforced. Walls were built and rebuilt to form a patio, its definition. Through engagement with the community, a project was enriched, a sense of belonging reconstructed. Memories were made in making a site where many more will be passed down. In architecture, we discuss ideas, concepts, theories, and projects, and images. We theorize and we build. In the end, these things we build always involve people. They're concrete things. And in closing this portion, I'd like to end with a quote from Zünkler again that stuck with me and grown with me the past year. It goes, I seek to give these questions concrete contents relevant to the real task of building, keeping in mind that what I'm designing will be part of a place, part of its surroundings, that it will be used and loved, discovered and bequeathed, abandoned and perhaps even hated. In short, that it will be lived in the widest sense. Thank you. I have a short time lapse of all of the filming that I did while we were there. And I just wanted to let it play as we speak.
Pardon me, we'll start. Sure. Thank you. That was really wonderful. I may have missed it, but how did you end up in Mexico?
Originally, I did a study abroad in my undergrad. I lived in the city of Oaxaca. And as I mentioned...
Why there?
What's that?
Why there?
Why there? It was a study abroad option, and I had never been there before, and it seemed interesting. It was with a small group of classmates, and turned out to be a wonderful place that I've returned to many times.
I just want to ask some questions to kind of get to know the project better. Was the program something you brought to the community, or something the community was discussing before you arrived?
The program started out. Their only request was the new basketball court. The existing one you see here on the short edge, it was anywhere from half to a full meter out of level. It was cracked beyond belief. It leaked through the foundations, causing foundation damage. It was really, for actually playing basketball, it was not very, it needed to be replaced, and that was their only real, their desire. They wanted the adjacent patio rebuilt, but it was very much, they left it at that. But their only demand was the actual playing surface. That was the most important part to them, that functioned correctly. And whatever happened beyond that, they absolutely wanted to renew the whole site, but what that was, we had gone through different